Albertsons introduces our exclusive new Signature family of brands. We know you take pride in the way you care for your family. That's why throughout the store, you'll find thousands of products, from coffee to ice cream, soup to cereal, fresh produce to fried chicken, all with the quality you'd expect at a budget-friendly price. Best of all, we proudly stand behind our Signature brands with a 100% money-back guarantee. Albertsons Signature Brands. Quality you can trust. Guaranteed.
There's some dangerous, large carnivore out there.
Yeah, I saw that bird pick a young deer off the road and fly away.
And it was just about getting dark, and we started panicking, running down this ridge, not really having any clue what was throwing rocks in our vicinity, good-sized rocks. And I stopped long enough to get a .357 out of my backpack and look back, and that's when I saw it. I saw one.
For a week, the town of Defiance was being harassed by a werewolf, and it's actually attacked two railroad workers, killed livestock, just a lot of weird stuff that was going on.
Good Sunday evening, Monster Xers. This is your host, Gunnar Monson. Shane is out in the field today, so with me today, filling in, is Julie Wrench. Julie, how are you today?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me tonight. How are you?
I appreciate you. I am good. Just got done reading. Actually, yesterday I read a book from one of our listeners, Dave Gibson. He was kind enough to send it to me, and it's called Living Amongst Sasquatch, a primer. It's kind of a story of Dave and his wife Pam lived on their boat for a while, traveled up and down the eastern seaboard, and decided to buy property in upstate New York in the Adirondack Mountains, and they had some, it seems like Bigfoot stuff going on there. In fact, Pam had a sighting of one. They found footprints, and it actually goes up through like October of last year when they were renting a cabin a short distance away from where they're going to be building a house. I mean, Dave has a kooky sense of humor. I found it a pleasurable read, and if you can get a hold of it, like you said, I would recommend it. So thanks, Dave, for sending it, and I enjoyed it. And I hope to hear more about what you guys are experiencing over there. It's not New York, state is not one of the places that most people think of when they think of Bigfoot. Have you had an opportunity? So it was a good read. I mean, they definitely had some weird stuff. Dave, was cutting down a tree and got hit in the head with another smaller tree that broke his neck. And so he's had they had all kinds of adventures, and like I said, he's got a quirky sense of humor, and I appreciate that. So
awesome.
It was a good book. Yeah, it's a good book. So, how was your weekend? Did you guys do any squatching this weekend?
It was a good weekend. We Yeah, we were out in the woods and did some hiking and investigating, and it was a pretty quiet weekend, though. Nothing of spectacular evidentiary value, but it was a wonderful weekend to get out and get out there in the woods. Beautiful. Spring is here. Things are starting to green up, and it's looking really good out there.
Awesome. Well, our guest today is Misty Alibo. And I asked her to pronounce her name, and I still butchered it. Sorry, Misty. And she is a active Bigfoot researcher. She's been actively researching for more than 20 years. She is also an author and has written a book, a sci-fi horror book, and it's actually the first book in a trilogy called Flesh and Blood Fury Bigfoot Rogue. So, and I have not read the book in its entirety yet, but I was reading the synopsis, and it is definitely sci-fi and Bigfoot eating people, and we will ask her about that.
Cool.
Did use, I mean, there are some people that have claimed, there's the people are disappearing, and that suggest that it might have something to do with the hungry Bigfoot. So we'll get some more information here from Misty. Misty, how are you today? Gunnar here with Julie.
I am doing. Hi, you guys. I'm doing really well. Thank you.
Hey, Misty.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Sounds like you guys know each other.
We've been talking.
So we appreciate you joining us today on Monster X. Tell us a little bit about
Thank you.
I always like to. I know that you had an encounter quite a while ago, but can you give us a little bit of background that led you into this crazy field of Bigfoot?
Oh, of course. Many, many years ago, when I was a teenager, I was hunting with my family and had a, life-changing but very brief encounter. And, of course, I was young, and I knew I saw something, but I couldn't maybe fathom what it was until, my mom and dad both agreed that they had saw something cross the road. And what I had saw was, just a few seconds, after that, and I saw it standing on the side of the hill. And I referred to it, and I will always refer to it as Bigfoot. I saw it. I know what I saw. And, since then, it's just been, many years of what started out was for me, was to maybe scientifically back up my truth, my experience, what I had. And it's just kind of roller coastered into a lot more, where I've talked to hundreds of people. And, yes, the book that I wrote is fiction, but it's been a fantastical journey and ups and downs and all arounds. And I'm at a place now where I never thought I would be sharing this with everybody. But I love it, and I believe wholeheartedly in Bigfoot, and it's become my life's passion.
Awesome. So your encounter when you were a teenager, you said quite some time ago. I can relate to that. But tell us a little bit. I mean, what kind of details can you tell us about your encounter?
I can tell you every detail. It was it was right around the first part of November. It was hunting season here in Montana, and I had been out all day with my brother and my mom and dad. We hiked around a lot and, looking for elk and deer, and, it's a general hunting season, so it's open to a lot of different animals. And that hunting season, we were just kind of struggling as a little bit of a family. We'd suffered a couple deaths, and I was 17 at the time, and hanging out maybe with your little brother and your mom and dad wasn't the family vacation I had envisioned, but it's what we'd always done. So we continued on with our traditions, and that afternoon we had quit hunting a little bit earlier, than normal. We were coming down the road. Obviously, we had gotten back to our truck and, driving down the road, and my brother was already asleep, leaned up against the passenger door, Mom and Dad in the front seat, and we were just coming down this road that we had come down hundreds of times before. My dad was a logger in the area. It's just a very familiar place to me. And I heard my mom in the front seat. She kind of made a noise. It was more of a, I don't know if I would call it a gasp or, whatever. But I heard my dad, he snapped at her. And he was just like, shut up, Mary. And Mary was my mom. And that's not something that is done in our family. He would never do that. And, of course, being a kid, I perked up. I was just like, oh, what's happening up there? Is there going to be drama? And I was just like, okay, nothing's happening. So I just kind of looked out the window, and I can't tell you how many seconds had passed. It was definitely seconds, not minutes. But I just, behind the driver's seat, I looked out the window, and it just was very quick. It was just the biggest, darkest man I had seen standing about 55, maybe 60 yards on the hill. And what still sticks in my mind to this day is the way that the sun was kind of setting behind the hill, and his shape was outlined. His shape was perfectly outlined. And, I just remember seeing, the wind, the little bit of breeze was lifting the hair on his left shoulder. And I just was like, oh my gosh, what, wait, and I sat there, and it was over and done with very quick. I mean, it was just one of those super quick things. And I just sat there, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what did I see? I'd, of course, always heard of Bigfoot, but it wasn't something that at 17 years old that I was, spending my time on. And we went a ways down the road, and I finally asked my mom and dad, I'm like, have you ever seen anything that you believe, is not real, but I know I saw something. And my mom turned around in her seat, and she said, did you just see the hairy man cross the road? And to this day, my exact words were, no, I saw him standing on the side of the hill, though. And, as the seconds turned into minutes, it dawned on me that, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, oh my gosh, it's real, it's there. And, my dad was very, very, I don't want you saying a word to anybody, let's just leave this alone. And, within, an hour later, I could see why, because we had, got back to our camp where other family was and mentioned, we saw something strange, and somebody was like, oh, don't tell me, you saw Bigfoot. And right then it was just like you kind of go into a secret protective mode of yourself, and, it was just like, to me it was a letdown. It was a huge letdown because I thought, oh my gosh, this is big. This is big. I guess I maybe thought that since I had saw it, the world was going to announce its existence. But that's not how it was at all. And for many years, after that, you kind of just stay in the background, reading, watching, talking to people, collecting different instances. And that's how it started, and that's how it turned into what it is today.
Awesome. So you fast forward to today, and you decided. What made you decide to write a Bigfoot book?
Well, I've always wanted to write something. Even in college, I wanted to write something, and even if my degrees didn't correspond to what my dream was, it was still a dream. And, my passion was evolved over the space of several years to being consumed with Bigfoot. You buy everything, you watch everything, you read everything. And I guess maybe I thought in the early days that writing like a first-hand encounter book was my ultimate goal, but it was hard to get people to talk to me, and especially at that time being pretty young. So I put it on the back burner, and down the road I had a graveyard position job that 12 hours of alone time, and you sit behind a computer and it just comes to you. And that's how it evolved. I mean, I can definitely thank my family for pushing me, because they're always like, oh, just write a Bigfoot book, you know, and you're always reading those science fiction stuff anyway. You know, write something like that. And I believe, you know, that the creativity needs to be within you to write something, you know, effective. And at the time, this, you know, science fiction, like a Bigfoot book that maybe was outside of the realm of what people were reading at the time, was just what was on my mind. So, you know, and it was not a quick process. I mean, it was a few years. And then after that, it kind of just sat there because I was just like, oh, you know, the Bigfoot thing was kind of becoming more popular. And I'm like, well, I don't know if people are ready for my kind of writing. I don't even know if this is my kind of writing, but it feels good. And so I just went ahead and, you know, pushed it. So that's how it evolved. It was just an imagination.
That is awesome. What year did that book come out?
It came out April 2 years ago. So we're actually, I believe that it maybe it might be 2 years today actually that it was published. Okay. Yeah, I just thought about that, and I thought about the date, and I'm like, I think it was 2 years ago. And I have my second book. The second book to the sequel is done. There were a couple setbacks, like an injury that kept me from writing for a while, but it is done, and it is ready to be read. And I'm working on the third one, and so yeah, it's coming together. It's coming together.
Okay, and where can somebody purchase your first book? Is it on Amazon or?
Oh yeah, yes. Amazon. I take them with me to the different conferences and stuff, but Amazon.com is the place to look for it. Okay. And it's entitled Flesh and Fury, Bigfoot Rogue, and I generally tell people it's just kind of easier to look for my name. My name might be easier to find than the book.
Okay.
Yeah, I did find your book on Amazon, and it's amazing is how many Bigfoot books there are out there right now. I mean, I remember reading a while back, because there was a gal that does Bigfoot erotica, for lack of a better term.
Oh my!
I mean, is making a really good living at, and I think I ran across some of those in the search for your book. And it's like, whoa!
No, that's not me.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about, though. I get posts, you know, daily about new Bigfoot stuff, you know, that's posted in the last 24 hours, and I've seen those come across my feed, and it takes me a little bit to wrap my head around it, but it's just like moving on.
Yeah.
So this book is part of a trilogy, Flesh and Fury, Bigfoot Rogue. Is that correct?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah, and so give us a little overview of the first book.
Well, the first book takes place in my home state of Montana, and basically, just a brief synopsis is that there's this fire tower watch ranger, and she's been on fire duty for a long time and experiencing some anomalies that have her concerned. She's ready to get off the mountain when a fire starts. And across the mountains, there is a clan of what I'm going to refer to as Leviathans, even though I know that's not the term a lot of people would associate with them, but I want to just say, you know, a thing. And they're essentially just plain old Bigfoot. And in conjunction, there's a couple of hunters, and everything just kind of collides together with a renegade or a rogue Bigfoot that kind of takes a taste of human flesh and enjoys it, and everything collides with a forest fire and, you know, two people trying to make it out alive. But the biggest part of the story is that one of my main characters is actually a Bigfoot, and we refer to him as Red, and he saves the day. So even though, you know, it is a science fiction type horror, bloody, you know, it just shows that they're good, and I don't believe that they're bad at all. And he kind of wraps the story up, and he pulls all the loose threads together, and he'll continue to do that throughout the trilogy.
Sounds very interesting. Yeah, I like this kind of book. Yeah, you know, I needed to do something that fit me, and there's several different storylines that come together, and like I said, it just all comes together and collides. And you know, I think at the time maybe that I finished that book, maybe there was a forest fire here in Montana, and it just, you know, it felt right. The creativity behind it at the time, it felt right to me, and you know, it just honestly wrote itself in my mind. All I did was put it on paper. And I tell people that, and they think that, you know, whatever. But the truth is that it just came together so well for me. I was very, very fortunate. And the second one is the same way. I hope people receive it with as much enthusiasm as they did the first one.
And that was a question: is do you find that people are receptive to this your first book? Are you doing pretty good with that? I mean, how's that going?
Yeah, I mean, you know, of course, you know, it's been out for 2 years, and, you know, people that read these kind of topics have read it and stuff and been anxiously awaiting the second one, which, like I said, it was put off for an entire year. And so, you know, people are still contacting me. It's a popular thing. But during these past few years, I've kind of shifted focus a little bit away from my writing and centered more on the research aspect of this, and began to travel a lot. So there's been a few things that have, I'm not going to call them setbacks, just simply adjustments for the trilogy. I mean, I'm sure some people could have, you know, wrote 3 books very quickly, but I just have to write and get it on paper when it feels right to me. So, you know, the first book, people still love it. It still sells very well, and I still enjoy it very much. But it's definitely time for book 2.
And that one is complete. When can we expect to see that one ready for public consumption?
I'm hoping that within the next couple of weeks to a month, we'll see it posted in my Facebook group and be able to maybe do a little bit of Amazon, you know, maybe do a sale and get some advertising and marketing and stuff for it. And so pretty quickly.
Cool.
Okay.
So
what's the name of your Facebook group? Sorry, Jenna. What's the name of your Facebook group?
It's called Squatch Stalker.
Okay.
It's you know, it's just very, I wanted people to be able to relate. There's a lot of groups out there that are super, super serious, and those groups are fantastic. I belong to many of them. I love them. I don't know a lot of people. People didn't know me coming into this. I've kind of stayed behind closed doors. So I wanted the group to be a very light, candid place where people could post about Bigfoot and have like a forum to talk to me and be able to meet people and, record their experiences and stuff like that. So my group is a very light, it's a fun place. It's a fun place to belong.
And there's really cool people in there. I know that I'm a member.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There are very cool people there.
Yeah.
I was waiting for the laughter to break out. So tell us, a couple of questions in the chat room. One was, where did you have your encounter when you were a teenager?
Without giving specifics away, because it is one of my very pointed research areas, northwest Montana, around the Kalispell, Montana area. There's many mountains here. I personally am 12 miles from Glacier National Park, one of the most wonderful places on Earth. So, yeah, there's lots of area here, and they're here.
And Bruce Kelly has asked, Misty, did your experience and your research help to add a sense of realism to your book? And soon to be books,
definitely did.
Plural.
Definitely. Because I stress highly that right now in this trilogy it's fiction. I'm working my way through a True Encounters book where I sit down with people and I hear their experiences. But my experience, my truth that was behind this book was definitely based on realism. Even though it's fiction, I mean, there's been so many wonderful things that I've encountered in the wilderness that backed this book up. The area and the people that read the book are going to recognize that I use names that are going to narrow it down for people. So, yeah, definitely.
So Misty, have you had experience with flesh-eating Bigfoots?
No, I have not.
Okay. Because there are those that suggest that many of the disappearances of people in some of the national parks and may be Bigfoot related.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say that's not true. I mean, Theodore Roosevelt wrote in his book about an instance right here in Montana 100 years ago, whatever it was, about one that was very aggressive. I mean, I'm not going to go against Teddy Roosevelt. He's kind of my hero. But in my experience, no. I've had encounters that myself, let's just call them experiences where I've been out in the woods where maybe I pressed my boundaries, and I think you get a warning. And I think that they just don't want to be bothered. I think that their existence is going to remain hidden, and that's how I'd like to see it. I'm totally 210% against any type of a kill type suggestion that would be like we need to kill a Bigfoot to prove its existence. That is unacceptable to me in every aspect. But possibly we don't know what's happening out there, when people do go missing. Thousands of people go missing yearly in Alaska, and there's several different, suggestions of what could it be. But since we're not out there, we're not seeing it happen, I'm not going to say, could it? Doubtful. I don't believe it. But, belief is in the eyes of the beholder, and my belief is just mine. It's not scientific. It's not scientific evidence, it's just my...
Bruce also asked, did writing the book have a cathartic, effect as far as dealing with or reconciling your own Bigfoot sighting?
No. writing the book was a dream, and it turned into a reality. And like I said, writing it just flowed. It came out. As far as my sightings, it was, I know what I saw from the very minute, the very second I saw it. I've always believed in it from that moment. Seeing is believing. So I don't believe I was trying to, reconcile emotions. I think that maybe they just fed off each other and grew it into something great.
Now, have you, Henry's asking if you have ever heard of Robert W. Morgan, and that he was aware that Robert lives there in the great state of Montana.
I have heard of him. I do not know him. Any of that. I just have heard his name. Yes.
Hmm. And so, I thought Montana was small enough state that everybody knew everybody. It's always funny when, like, I'm from Oregon. People, well, you're from Oregon. Do you know so and so? It's like,
yeah.
Well, I live in Oregon. It's actually a fairly large state. I do not know everybody
right.
in Oregon. So.
Well, Montana I think the last time I read was the 7th biggest state in the United States, and it's rural, it's rugged, and there's a lot of wide open areas where you can go days without seeing another human. So you definitely might know your neighbor, but 3 neighbors down, they could be miles away. Your 3rd neighbor might be, far. I live in a very small town in the northwest section. So the bigger cities are to the east and the south, and so if it's not somebody that's contacted me personally, I probably wouldn't know them because I'm not a social butterfly.
Mhm. Okay. Well, now you had mentioned that you do research. Now, are you a part of a research group, or do you have a small number of people that you go out with? Can you talk about some of your, maybe particular evidence you may have found, or prints, or anything like that?
I decided several years ago that many research groups were not for me. Maybe their thoughts and ideas on how to pursue the topic was different than mine, or just maybe it was just simply that I don't believe taking a ton of people into the forest is going to attract these things. I think you're going to trample evidence is what you're going to do. So I have, at this point in time, exactly 2 people that I work with, sometimes only 1. Oftentimes I'll get a phone call or people will send me pictures or whatever and ask me to come and speak with them privately. I do that and we'll investigate the area. But I, within my own group, have decided that it's just easier to work with people I know or people that maybe, I'm not going to say trained, but have wilderness experience and they've had their own, encounters, and it's just simpler that way. So as far as working within a group, Squatch Chalker is its own group, and there's a very select number that travel with me. The traveling I've done has been extensive all over the western seaboard and New Mexico, Arizona, and stuff like that. Here recently, I've spent a lot of time in North Idaho, and it's been fantastic. And what I found over there is, we found prints. I've been fortunate enough this year to get what I think is a really good hair sample. It's like nothing I've ever encountered before. And, of course, I have, some scat that is not familiar. I'm not familiar with it. But one thing I guess I don't place a lot of stake on as far as evidence in my area is tree structures. That's not something that I call, that's Bigfoot related. We have a lot of logging, we have a lot of snow load, we just have a lot of different variables that can move trees and sticks around that are not conclusive. So, interviewed thousands of people, thousands over the space of this time of 23 years. So I've got a lot of different views and a lot of different takes, and people have shared a lot of different pieces of what they've discovered with me, pictures. I myself have taken many pictures of tracks, gathered a lot of scat, which is not always the most pleasant thing to do, and hiked a lot of miles.
Tell your friends about that. I collect what I believe to be Sasquatch scat. You want to come look at my freezer?
People ask me, like, I'll be like checking into a hotel or something, and the lady behind the counter will say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I pause for a second, and I'll be like, "Oh, I'm an author." And she'll be like, "Oh, what book did you write, or what's your name?" And you'll be there, and she'll be clicking it into the internet, and it'll come up with Bigfoot, and their faces change and stuff. But I mean, my friends over the years are very, very tight-knit group, and they're kind of used to me being like, "Oh gosh, guess what I got today? I got scat." And of course, that's might not be what we call it here, but it's like, "Oh, will you look at this?" So they're used to me.
That's awesome. Now, do you do most of your research in one particular area? I know you said you're close to the mountains over there. Do you spend a lot of time in Montana, or do you?
Oh, yeah. I spend a lot of time in Montana. I do spend a lot of time traveling. Like I said, I've gotten reports where all the way from New Mexico, and so I'll travel anywhere where I believe that somebody has something to show me. That might be traveling a little bit blind, but it's a good way to do it. And here in Montana, I have a few areas that I consider, my research areas. I recently, within just this past month, came across something, that I was not expecting in a whole new area. And it's been really, really awesome kind of getting outside of the box, what I'm used to, and researching that a little bit and spending some time in this new area. And I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. I can credit that to North Idaho. And I have spent an incredible amount of time over there. The people are wonderful and genuine, and I think that the mountains over there have a lot to offer and a lot of secrets.
Interesting. Well, Misty, Montana does not have a large amount of reports like in the BFRO database. What do you attribute that to? I mean, that there's not. I thought about that, and several years ago I got online and I looked at the different, reporting websites, and I essentially printed off a map of Montana and narrowed it down to counties, and then went and printed off everything that had been reported per county and organized it in my own database. And of course, there were several that overlap each other that were the same report. And from what I've heard from people and what I've been told from right here within my state, up until a few years ago, I don't think that it was socially acceptable to maybe talk about it. I think those that did talk about it were really wanting an answer. I'm not 100% sure, but I've definitely noticed that there's not been a lot. But you stop and you get to know people, and
you know, just a couple weeks ago, I was, you know, out in another completely separate area, and I came down off the mountain and was checking into a hotel when of course it was one of those instances where, what do you do? Oh, this is what I do. And the man's like, oh, well, you know what? Many years ago when I was hunting, and he went on to tell me his experience, and you know, I don't have an answer as to why they're not reported more, other than we're kind of a closed mouth group.
Well, I guess one of my feelings about that is, one, if you did like a bell curve of population to Bigfoot reports, I mean, Montana, while it's a huge state, doesn't have a lot of people in the state, as you were talking about earlier. So, I mean, it takes two things to have a Bigfoot encounter. You know, you have to have a Bigfoot and a person. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that if you look at the heavily reported areas, Northern California, Washington State, and Oregon, Ohio, I mean, you got a lot of forest land, and you got a higher population of people. I think Montana, you probably are getting exactly the kind of number of reports you'd think of based on population and available forest land. And you might have a lot of Bigfoots in Montana, you just don't have a lot of people. Plus, you always have to have someone who is willing to report.
Right.
It varies from
exactly
from place to place how open people are to sharing their encounters. So that may attribute somewhat to a low number of reports in Montana.
And I agree with that. You know, and a lot of people hear just the name Montana and they think of, you know, tons of mountains and tons of lakes and tons of rivers and things like that. And yes, we do have a lot of that, but you know, it's kind of geographic is a great way to explain it. You know, like in my area, Northwest Montana, you can go 5 minutes in any direction and find some water source or, you know, some form of outdoors. But you travel into eastern Montana and it just seems like the prairie. It goes on for days. All you see is rolling hay fields and stuff like that. So geographically speaking, it's always just been my theory that, you know, like you said, there's just maybe a small corner that would harbor a population, let alone harbor people that spend enough time out there to have an encounter.
True. So,
question. Do you have or animals might be?
I'm sorry, pardon me?
Do you have I mean, what's your...
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me, Misty?
Yes, I can hear you, Julie.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like Gunner's breaking up over there. One of the questions I had was, with all the reports that you have taken, and you said, you know, you talked to people about their encounters and experiences, have they suggested to you that they believe them to be an ape, a large primate? Do they look more human? I mean, is there a higher statistic of people saying they looked more human or more ape, or what do you say?
I would say it's almost split down the middle.
Okay.
I've had people tell me that, you know, they've been out hunting with a gun in their hand, and they see this thing and they're looking at it, but yet they don't pull the trigger because they're just like, what is it? Its eyes are expressive. That was one thing that really touched me one time, is somebody said their eyes are very expressive. And he was kind of a crusty old coot that had been around for a long time. And, you know, on the other hand, I've heard people say that it was, displaying complete animalistic behaviors and tendencies. I personally believe that they're very intelligent, and I can't tell you scientifically what they're more like, really split down the middle of what people believe.
That's very interesting. It seems, because I'm here in Ohio, it seems like in Ohio, a lot of reports tend to say they look more human-like. But there's always a lot of hair, involved. And some places it says they have shorter hair. That now, a lot of them here in Ohio seem to have the longer hair. What's your take in Montana as far as the physical attributes? Is there a common thread, or?
In Montana, I almost always hear the same thing. They're very tall, very broad, very muscular. You always hear that if they get a good facial sighting, that their face has no hair, but yet the skin is dark. The hair color has varied from, one person told me it was gray, to the one I saw. I'm as certain as I can be that it was black hair. And most everybody I've always talked to has always called it hair and not fur. And to me that suggests something, more human-like, maybe longer type thing. And I can tell you that in my own personal experience, the one I saw its hair lifting off its shoulder, and it was long.
Now, have you ever taken any reports of white creatures? I know that we have.
No, I have not.
Cited here. Okay. That's interesting.
No. I've been told. I have really taken only maybe I would say 75 emails, reports, what have you, in different variety of people saying, "Oh, it just crossed the road," or many of them are also just a very brief encounter, like my own. Wow, it boom right there before your eyes. But it seems like people that are loggers, fishermen, hunters, people that are out there a lot have a lot more to say. I know I get almost, I would say at this point 60% to 70% of what people share with me come from hunters.
Wow, yeah, that is a good point. It does seem that a lot of reports that I have, the people aren't out there looking for this. It's they run into it basically.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's especially hunters. We had Jeffrey Sismecki from Pennsylvania on a few weeks ago. He had ran into it 7 different times, different creatures, and he was a very avid hunter. So, that tends to make sense.
Mhm. Well, myself personally, when I go out, and I'm always very open about this, that sure, I have areas that I know there's something there. I've taken photographs of prints of, like I said, I've got hair, I've got scat. But, I think if you go out there and you just sit there and wait for them to come to you, it's probably not going to happen. And I have just found in my own personal life and my own personal investigation that the more I go out there and just fish or hike or, actively hunt, I've actively, hunt a lot here in Montana. There's several different and a variety of seasons, that if you just go out there and do your thing and act normal, act natural, and maybe frequent an area. So you start seeing, okay, this tree was placed here a few days ago, but it's moved, and you know there's no other humans in the area. It starts to kind of paint a picture, and you start to see patterns. But you know, I simply act naturally. I mean, I carry a gun and go hunting, and you know, go fishing, go hiking. We camp out there. We ride ATVs. And you spend enough time in an area just acting normally and acting naturally, you just start to see a pattern. And I find that it's really works well for me. And, of course, everything I find is not Bigfoot related, but it's something that I still write down and document.
Right. You so you said you were hunting when you had your first encounter. So you grew up hunting, basically, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, we spend a lot of time, you know, outdoors, and you're right. When you do spend time in a particular area, you start realizing, you know, my thinking is if something is 8 feet tall and weighs 600, 700, 800 pounds, and it's going through the woods, and, you know, the trees are very close together, it's going to be leaving a mark. There's no way it can't. So once you start realizing, you know, you see things that weren't there just a few days before, that really does seem to help with, you know, finding anything of good evidence. So I think it's great that you guys are in the same area a lot.
Oh, you know, definitely. And it also gives you kind of like, it's almost like it's an experiment every time you go out. You know, you know that things were one way, and 2 miles down the road, you know, all of a sudden there's something that's changed. So you investigate it. You look at it from a lot of different angles. You take some pictures of it. You sit on it thinking, what could it be? What might have caused it? This type of thing. And you document it. But like I said, you do notice a pattern, and you do start to see these changes. And every season, it's important to get out there every season, because the landscape looks different during every season, and it changes every year. So you have to kind of, I'm not saying be closed-minded and just one area, but you really can't just get in your vehicle and drive, you know, 20 miles into the mountain and just jump out and start looking for Bigfoot. There's got to be something there that kind of, you know, clicks the little switch in your mind that says, okay, this is not fit, and this isn't right. Or, you know, you just, in my case, I keep going back to ground zero, and, you know, the circle of searching, you know, just maybe keeps expanding a little bit, but like I said, repetition and developing a habit of acting naturally and returning to an area so you can see it, and it's you know, 360-degree view of it.
Right.
Well, Misty, you go back to, like, when you say ground zero, you go back to the area of your first initial encounter. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so you've been doing this. I mean, your initial encounter was quite a while ago. What's been the most compelling encounter that you've had going back to the same area since then? I mean, there must be something that has happened. You've had enough what you think is activity that you can't explain away by known animals to keep you coming back to the same area. What is some of that stuff that's happened that?
You know, over the years, there's been vocalizations. For example, when everything will just turn calm, and everything in the wilderness quits making noise, that's not common. You know, there's always a bird or a bug or something making noise. You hear brush break or something like that. There's always something. But the wilderness turns calm and you hear vocalization that is completely outside of anything that should be there. You know, we have mountain lions. They make a distinctive sound, but it's not that. You know, bears make a distinctive sound. Every animal has its own, you know, personality. And you start hearing things like that, and sometimes it scares you to death. And you're just like, wow, you know, that I can't explain it. One instance that I look back on, and I absolutely cringe. I absolutely think, wow, how stupid. And at the time, I was just simply wrapped up in myself. And it was on another hunting trip, and it was during a very, very hot archery season. And my brother and I were not Bigfooting in any capacity. We just decided to stop along this road and call for elk. And we had just walked a little bit down this reclaimed road, and a bull let out with a bugle, like not far from us at all. And you know, we pursued it, and eventually my brother shot it, and we were working very, very fast. But during this whole process, like I said, I shouldn't even call it hunting. I call it stupidity at the time, because we had drove into a little town to replenish our ice supply, and it was over 90 degrees, and we're just not used to that temperature. At least I'm not. So I was walking around in shorts and flip-flops. I was not hunting. I was simply my brother's ears. And we got very lucky, but I didn't. Walking around in flip-flops is never advised in the woods, and I managed to fall down. And at the time, I kind of suspected that I might have broke my arm, but we had work to do. But during this time when we were trying to take care of this animal and harvest it, something was below the road, and you could hear brush breaking, and it was big brush. You know, it was like crack. It wasn't, you know, little twigs. And it was a little bit outside of what I would call my zone, and I was in pain. It was hot. You know, it was a messy job. And, you know, my brother and dad, I'm like, yeah, I did. And, you know, at first I thought that by the sound of it would be there. And because it sounded big. And as it got closer, I was just like, that is weird. You know, it's big, and it sounds like one animal, but it's not moving, you know, like a stalker. It's not moving stealthily. It's definitely, you know, and this was, like I said, a few years ago, so I was definitely entrenched in you know, the Bigfoot world, but I still held a, you know, a 9 to 5 or a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. job, I should say. And so I just thought it would be funny, and I'm just like, hey, bear, you know, go away. And so I started launching rocks over the side of the road, and the brush was really thick. And, you know, that's kind of just what you do, you know, is hey, bear, make noise, get it to move away. We were probably leaving a horrific scent trail for it. Mm-hmm. And out of the bottom of the road, you know, or below the road, and this is something that, you know, people share with me all the time, but sharing my own instances is harder because I did not see anything. I heard it. A rock comes flying back up the road. You know, bears don't throw rocks. Elk don't throw rocks. You know, and you just stop and you think, and at the time I was like, oh my gosh, how stupid and how idiotic can you be? You're right here. You know, you took a picture of footprints, you know, a mile over the mountain. A mile could be nothing to travel to these animals. I mean, for us it could be impossible, but for them, you know, they just pick stuff up and move it. And my brother and my dad are like, you know, quit with your crap, you know, we got a job to do. And I'm like, I didn't throw that at you. And then it was more like you could hear like trees shaking, not trees, but branches shaking. You could hear the limbs, and it sounded it sounded kind of like you see in like movies, where a gorilla will shake the tree and get angry, and that's what it sounded like. Is it sounded like something was just thrashing the bushes. And I mean, it stayed at a respectable distance, but I can tell you, we worked very quick, very hard, and we're gone. And that's a warning to me. That's not something that says, oh, just stay around. But yet it was not, it wasn't aggressive. It didn't try to take our heads off. It didn't do anything like that. It was a warning. So you heed that warning and you be safe and you move on. And I've had encounters where just last year, I heard you say earlier that the gentleman's book you just read, he had a stick or a tree come at him that actually broke his neck. That's terrible, but I can relate to that because, just walking down the road, no wind, no nothing, and a tree falls across the road. I mean, okay, it could definitely be rotten. It definitely could be just a rotten log, and the wind caught it just right. But then you stop and you look at it, and it's like no wind.
And it's green.
And yeah, and it's green, and you get up there and you look at it, and your heart starts racing. And after, shortly, I started this when I was 17, so it's been 23 years, almost 23 years. And in my early 20s, my brother and I had another crazy experience. And something similar has happened twice now. So it's not like things are happening every single day. That's not realistic. But we were hunting.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Is people think that because somebody has multiple experiences, that something happens. Oh, every time you go out, something happens. No. Out of thousands of times of going out, a few things happen.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can imagine it's been 23 different hunting seasons, 23 different this and that, tons of camping trips, tons of miles on your vehicle and your feet, and you get 2 instances. So, no, it does not happen like that. And am I saying that it's definitely Bigfoot? Absolutely not. Because I don't know. I wasn't sitting there to watch it happen, and I just, I always stress that. I didn't see it happen, but I have my own thoughts. And we were hunting, and I was driving that morning, and so that means he had to get out and move logs or whatever. And we came to this little side road, and it had a little tiny blowdown across the road, but at the time I was driving a little tiny Ford Ranger truck. And I'm like, oh, you better move that, I don't want to waste time, with, tires being, flat or anything. So he gets out and he just moves it. And we drove down this little road, and it only went maybe a mile. It was a road to nowhere, and we came back. And as I came around this little corner, the log that he had moved, it doesn't take very long to cover a mile in and a mile out. And we were in a vehicle. We were not walking. So pretty quick, the log was back across the road and creeped me out. I was just like, what? I mean, it's got limbs on it. It didn't just roll back in the road.
Right.
And there's something.
And I mean, at the time, my brother and I, looked at each other. What?
Go ahead. Finish your thought, please.
Oh, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, that's not okay. And it was just like, maybe we'll just, bump the truck over this little blowdown and moving on. So, like I said, have no idea what it was. I wasn't there, but again, it was in my zone, and it didn't feel right to stick around. It was more like, you opened my natural gate. I need you to go now, and you go.
It's that we call inclusionary evidence or exclusionary evidence, and there's evidence that it excludes any other possibility except, like, a lot of times it comes down to it's human or it's something else similar to human that could do, what else could move a log across the road? you don't see a lot of bears
Right.
or deer, or I mean, so well, you can't. It goes into the weird, question mark pile. It's not definitive, unless I've had some weird stuff happen that I didn't see Bigfoot do it, but I can't explain it by any known animal. It just goes into the X-Files pile, as they call it. But
Yep.
That.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Right, and it's always funny because it's kind of a breath of fresh air to talk to someone of your perspective that doesn't want to attribute everything that is weird to Bigfoot, and accepts the fact that unless I see Bigfoot do it, I can't say, oh, Bigfoot did that. But there are people out there that do that very thing. So.
Right. There's a lot of people out there that do that very thing.
I am not on board with that philosophy at all, because I last year drove to New Mexico, and I of course use these different journeys in life to maybe knock something off a bucket list or whatever. So it's not like I just drove there just to speak with this person. But in their mind, everything that went bump in the night was Bigfoot, and I'm not saying that it's not, and I'm not knocking their belief. It's just simply really not feasible. It's not realistic to think that every single bump you hear in the night is Bigfoot. I mean, if every single thing over the years since I was a young child, if I cataloged every single thing and said, that's Bigfoot, I would be so scared to death that I probably would never leave the bed. I would be like covering my head up, shaking in fear. And there's things that you just in the back of your head, you're like, did I see him? I refer to it as a him. No. Did I see the big guy? No. But you can't explain this to me. This track is not a double-stepping bear. It's in the mud. Bears leave claw marks up front. It doesn't have that. It has 5 toes. You see that in the snow. And you're like, one of my most favorite pictures that I took was, in the snow, and it was in the middle of January, and we were riding ATVs. And we actually have ATVs that have tracks on them, so we can really get out and cover some ground. And it was my brother that found this trail, and the road was completely unimpeded. You're breaking fresh snow, and all of a sudden you come across this trail that's something that has a stride of 5 feet and has a left and right big toe. Blows your mind. I'm not going to lie and say that, I don't believe that was Bigfoot. I do believe that was Bigfoot. But is it scientific evidence? Absolutely not. It's a belief, and some people believe. I was just recently, turned on to this encounter where somebody told me that belief is more spiritual, and I really took that to heart. And I'm like, to me, though, everything that maybe I find spiritual, somebody else doesn't. Maybe what they do, I don't. But being out there and being one with the wilderness, and you can't explain it, I might put a name on it, and I might call it Bigfoot, because I was there and I saw it with my own eyes. I saw it, and or I experienced. I heard the vocalizations. I saw the rock or the branch or the tree. We have had one other encounter, and I think I know what I saw again, but I'm not gonna put a belief on it. Again, we were riding ATVs in the spring of the year, and we had went through this big snowdrift. And of course, I went first thinking that I could pull it off, and of course I couldn't, and I got stuck, and everybody got stuck trying to help me out, and it was a real fiasco. And we ended up going up this trail farther, and on the way back, it was the same time of year as this, spring bear season. My brother spots something moving. He's one of those people that can see something moving from like thousands of yards away, and I need contacts and binoculars, and yeah, right. I mean, it's totally unfair. But so he's looking at it in his scope, and it's right above, walking at a left angle, above where the snowdrift was, but there was some brush. I don't believe there's any bear in Montana at the shoulder that walks on 2 feet, that's going to go 8 feet and is going to be able to walk on its back leg for that far. But yet there was brush, never got a full, clear, picture of it. We were looking at it through scopes and binoculars and stuff. So, again, do I think? Absolutely. But do I know? No, I don't. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like that first sighting where he was, boom, right there, snap in your face.
Well, it's just because people get into semantics about, people say, I believe that basically that's, you draw that conclusion based on your experience and the evidence that you collect at the time. So, and every piece of evidence requires context. So, I mean, there's, when people are putting up a picture and say there's a Bigfoot in it, what's the context of the picture? What else? What other corroborating evidence did you find? What else happened? So when you go out and Bigfoot per se, when you're looking for Bigfoot, what kind of evidence collection methods do you use? Do you do audio recording? Do you do video? What kind of stuff do you do like that?
Well, in my previous dealings, what I have done is it seems convenient for somebody maybe to wear a GoPro. And in early days, even now, I don't know anybody that can outfit, a full team of people with GoPros on their chests or their helmets and on their backs. That's another thing that I do. But, we've used GoPro cameras as we're moving through the forest and then rewatch the video. And most of the time you get absolutely nothing. I have done audio recordings and then you listen to them, or I have a couple people that are really good with computers, which I shouldn't say computers, but audio equipment that can maybe break it down and stretch it out and say, okay, it was definitely a coyote. Or I don't know. There's a lot of don't knows. Like I said, he wasn't standing there, talking to me on the phone. I wasn't recording the conversation, so it's a don't know. But, things like that. I've tried using, trail cams, and trail cameras do not seem to be effective. I have absolutely never had a chance where I can take a picture of of something like that myself. I've just taken pictures of, tracks and taken pictures of scat and hair. And how I go about collecting that is I'm weird. In the early days when we started this, it wasn't uncommon for somebody to be like, oh, as a joke, to give me a box of Ziploc bags or a box of, latex gloves. And I was always like, ha, 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 you're funny, but you can't collect evidence with bags like that because they draw moisture. I want paper bags. So, that's what we do. And I try to do it not to turn it in. I simply do not have the funds to be like, here's my scat, here's my hair. I don't have the funds to do that. But you can still collect it where it remains pure, and I do that by using rubber gloves and, tweezers, and you just can't go up and rip a handful of fur or hair out of a tree and sit there and sniff it and then expect to send it to a lab and be like, oh, there's none of my DNA on that,
Right.
Not realistic, not going to happen. And even though I'm not collecting for that, I'm not saying I wouldn't in the future or that I don't maybe plan to, but, you have to follow a certain protocol for it to remain pure. I mean, it's just like it's just like anything. And am I pro at it? Definitely not. You know, sometimes you're not prepared. Sometimes you just think, I'm going to go out, and it seems to be like it's these times when you're not prepared where you just throw on a pair of flip-flops or put on a pair of tennis shoes or whatever, and it's those times where you just take a little hike off into the woods or something that it seems like, oh, great, what could that be or whatever. So I'm not always 100% prepared, and you know, you have to go back and regroup and you know, hope that it's still there, hope that you didn't waste time by hiking back to your vehicle or your camp or whatever. So, but I do believe that there should be some type of a chain, but I don't always follow it because I'm not always Bigfooting. Even when I'm in the woods, you know, I always hope, I always think that, oh, okay, maybe today's the day. But, you know, you might just take this little trail because you saw a giant mule deer up there and you're like, oh, this could be my chance. And you take this trail with your hunting rifle and because there's, you know, 200 other hunters out in the field, you don't think that it's going to be your day. But yet it seems to be it's those times when I see something unnatural or unnormal.
Mhm. Yeah, I can relate to that. And it seems like when you least expect it is when you hear the most bizarre things too. You know.
Oh, definitely.
And you don't have the audio on, but you hear these crazy sounds. That's always the kicker for me.
Or it hits so fast, you know. It's just like, unless you're going to just sit there, and if you're moving around or whatever, you know, you can put a little audio recorder in your pocket and let it just record. But if you're out there for like 12 hours walking around and you're hunting or / doing this or maybe gathering firewood or whatever for the winter, there's other exterior noises. Your own breathing messes up those recordings sometimes. Mm-hmm. And not only that, are you going to go back and logically, realistically, are you going to go back and listen to 12 hours of yourself breathing or yourself crunching through the woods or sitting there doing nothing, you know, or maybe your partner, whatever, your conversation. So it seems like, you know, I've not been 100% effective in getting anything audio. Any vocalizations I've come to put in the, that's strange, are ones where you're just sitting around the camp at night and something lets out a blood-curdling, you know, scream that you can't associate with a mountain lion. And in my area, you know, short of a wild cat of some type, like a bobcat or, you know, a mountain lion, there's not a lot that can make that type of high-pitched. But then there's also the depth and the volume of it. It doesn't fit mountain lion. You know, that comes from something big. You know, you can definitely tell the difference between like a baby elephant and a mother elephant. You know what I mean? You can tell the size difference. You can tell the maturity. And I haven't been 100% effective in gathering audio. I'll be definitely honest with that.
I don't think that anybody that. Yeah, well, it does. I don't think that anybody does, and I think the layman, the person that isn't really into Bigfoot research, underestimates the enormity of the task. Like you're referring to, we go out a lot of times, and we may not just have one audio recorder, but 5, 6, 7 audio recorders, which is great. That, you know, audio is one of the least invasive kind of data collection that you can do. But then on the other side of that, somebody actually has to listen to, you know, somebody has to sit there and go through all that audio. And we, fortunately, in our little research group, we have a couple of crazy people, Shane being one of them, and Larry being one of them, that will actually sit and listen to 15 or 100 hours of audio to find the nuggets that are there. But what you say? 1, 2, 3 people researching the area.
Right.
Sounds like you're kind of breaking up again.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, are we still connected?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
What is your goal?
No.
He cut out again.
What is your goal as a Bigfoot researcher?
That's a really good question. I've asked myself that many times after, just complete months of failure. And I don't know if I have a goal, because what is it going to take? What is it going to take for, the population to say conclusively Bigfoot exists? It's going to take a lot. And I'm not willing to provide a body. Nobody I know is willing to provide a body, and no one I know is willing, myself included, going to harm one. So there's that. What am I trying to do by taking video and rewatching it and spending, mind-numbing, head-bashing hours rewatching, videos and stuff like that? I don't know. I think for me, it's just a personal adventure. It's to me, it's just personal. It's something that's close to my heart. And I don't know, maybe these things are more human than animal. And maybe we need to give them, which I do, we need to give them more respect. We need to respect their backyards more. We need to respect the habitat and the environment and everything more, not just for Bigfoot, but for every animal. And I say that as a hunter. I think that you can do all this responsibly, but there's a line, and I draw a line sometimes, and it's just like, I've been in this area too long. Let's just move to the next one or whatever. So I have to say, I don't have an ulterior goal other than maybe like one of the chat people asked earlier. Maybe it's just to simply align it in my mind. Maybe it's just simply to be put into another folder that gathers a lot of dust on my desk, and that's best I can do with that one. Is it's personal. I don't know.
So your goal is not to provide proof to the general public that Bigfoot exists.
I would like to be able to say, hey, here's this. But I'm kind of small times. I don't have the funds, and I don't have the opportunity to present things like for laboratory study. And so for me to be able to do that would be fantastic. But realistically, it's not going to happen that way, simply because I'm not funded for that. But again, I honestly, after all these years, think that it's going to take something a lot more heartbreaking for the world to believe than what I'm willing to provide.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I often say that basically what it comes down to prove the existence of the species is either one, in a specimen, alive or dead, and it could, die of natural causes and somebody just happens upon it. That'd be the ideal scenario for me, anyway. I'm also in the camp of I'm the no-kill. Bigfoot doesn't care if we prove they exist or not. They seem to be doing fine on their own. The argument that we need to kill one to protect their environment, to me, does not hold water, because if we should be protecting that environment anyway for animals that we already know exist. So to say, well, we need to kill one to protect their habitat, to me, does not hold water. But
I agree 100%.
That the other definitive proof would be a long-term study like, say, Jane Goodall with chimpanzees, that somebody that is documented well with video and audio and multiple, where you can see what you're videotaping something that you know what it is, and but no single fuzzy picture, or for that matter, any single really clear picture is probably going to be enough to move the needle to proof and scientific acceptance. So that's what
I agree. I mean, that's just simply a fact. I mean, look at the amazing cast that, like Cliff Barackman, he's got hundreds of them in just one single, a trail. He cast 100 of them, 100 plus, in one simple area, and then you look at somebody with the genius of Dr. Meldrum that can look at those casts and see dermal ridges and the mid-tarsal break, and and has gone on the record, as a respected, doctor, and said, yes, they're there, and that still hasn't done it. And, there to me is proof that they exist, but a photograph is not proof. To me, a photograph, with the technology that's out there today, a photograph is so easily spoofed. To me, that's not going to do it. It's going to take, like you said, a specimen or something, like that. It's going to take something big. I mean, there's been many research studies done on the DNA collected. Dr. Meldrum did a fantastic one a few years ago on the cabin up in Canada, where he collected dried blood samples, and it wasn't human, and it wasn't in the DNA record book, let's just call it. So explain to me how that's not proof. But again, I just think people are going to expect, like you said, a specimen or a body, and the only thing I would ever be willing to provide would be a specimen. And if you listen to myths or local gossip, perhaps they've already got proof. Perhaps they're just not willing to say it. Yes, it's there. Yes, they're a living, breathing, animal, or who knows. I mean, I don't 100% always follow what the government says as gospel. So there's a lot of different things to look at when you think of that. I mean, there's over when Mount St. Helens blew back in the 80s, a gentleman that lived over there told me that he was on the cleanup crew, and he saw enormous blackened bodies. They were too big to be humans, loaded into a military helicopter. It would definitely be in the. What's that?
No, if they were humans, why would they be being loaded onto a military helicopter?
Exactly, and I can't always just give everybody the benefit of the doubt, though, and say, yes, he seemed true, and yes, I was able to use, my background in psychology to say, he displayed, micro expressions, this and this and this, but I'm not an expert in those areas. So far be it for me to say that he was telling an untruth or a truth. I can only say the feeling I got from him was that he thought he saw something. And for that, I give him kudos for saying, this is what I saw. But, are you going to get the government to be like, oh, absolutely, they exist? I think there's too many factors that would influence that at this point in time. The timber industry, the way that the housing developments are moving out and up and into the mountains, literally. People going off the grid. I don't necessarily think that the government is just going to be like, yeah, they're there, even though they might already know they are.
Right. And I don't think that the government even has I just seeing how that they operate. It's usually like, we'll answer that problem when we get to it. There's not a whole lot of proactive situations going on out there related to things like this.
Right. I mean, there are those of us that...
Problem.
Exactly. I've also been told, because, like I said, there's been so many over the years. I've also been told that people have taken different things, like a specimen. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but here in Montana, up a little bit closer to the Canadian border, there's a town called Browning, and it's like a tribal area, and this happened several years ago. They discovered something on their property. It appeared to be a juvenile Bigfoot body, and I do not know the whole story of this. It's been very, very closed mouth, and you get several different stories about this. So I don't know what its entirety could be truth, if anything. But the story is, they took it to the tribal government, and the tribal government then just, took it one step forward, and they, the guys in black, or, whatever they want to call them, come in and we're like, oh, it's nothing, it's a bear, or it's this or it's that, but yet they wanted to take the whole thing and just brush it under the carpet, but yet supposedly this family had taken photos of the entire thing, and they had split up the specimen and only given a portion of it as proof. And when they were kind of shot down, or if whatever happened, and like I said, I don't know, because it's really hard to get accurate information on this. They then took the body out onto their property and buried it, and conveniently forgot the location and shut their mouth and didn't want to talk about it anymore. It was like they had their name dragged through the mud. They were mocked, made fun of. They had the government saying, oh, it's nothing, but yet it was making papers, making the headlines. And again, this is all several years ago, and I don't know the specifics of it, just simply because it's so convoluted. It's definitely a murky water with that story.
That's interesting, though. I mean, and then it becomes just an interesting anecdotal story without the proof, without somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah. So Misty, you are speaking at the inaugural International Bigfoot Conference coming up September 2nd through the 4th in Kennewick, Washington. Tell me a little bit about your. You have your presentation ready? What is the topic are you going to speak to?
That's been on my mind a lot lately. I think that what I want to direct this to is, maybe not just focusing on presenting people with a whole bunch of, PowerPoint slides that just show more pictures of more tracks, of more, tree structures, of more scat. And I think how I want to lean with this is more on the human factor. What is your truth? What is your story? Because we can all just get up there and say, this is what I've encountered here in Montana, and this is what I've encountered in North Idaho recently. But tell me more. Tell me what your experience is. Tell me. It fascinates me what people have to say, because the stories, the experiences, the encounters, they're all over the board. Some of them from brief seconds to where one lady was actually using the bathroom, and she was on a hunting trip and was using the bathroom and looked up and was able to watch this thing for a little bit and was able to give me really accurate and true details, and was actually able to take me back to the place. And, so it's huge. As far as my presentation, I just don't know if I want to go with the same old, here's what I saw in Montana. Because most of all, if people are there, they have an idea that it exists, or they have an experience that they, know it exists. I think I want to lean towards that. I want to know what people have to say. I want to know what other people think. And in order to do that, you have to do the human factor. You have to be one-on-one. You have to be interactive. And I just think that might be the way I choose to go with this.
Well, cool. Shane and I will be also making our debut as speakers at the International Bigfoot Conference. Again, September 2nd through the 4th in Kennewick, Washington. So if you haven't got your tickets, go check it out. You can look it up on Facebook, and it takes you to you can get them through their Facebook page, but you can also go to their website. So, and Ed Brown is one of the organizers. We had Ed on the show a while back. So Misty, in the past, you've spent 20-something years researching. Do you think that as a whole, the Bigfoot community, Bigfoot research community, those that go out and look, are on the right track? Are we making headway? Is there any? Do you see any light at the end of the tunnel? The possibility anytime soon of us confirming the existence of this species?
I can't speak from for the different groups and what type of conclusive evidence they have gathered. I can speak from my point of view, and that's that I'm a long ways off of saying and being able to prove that they exist. I know what I think, but I think that with perseverance and just staying out there and staying active and having so many people literally by the day kind of stop and think about what they might have experienced through the years and what that might have meant for them, but they maybe necessarily didn't consider it real. Now it's getting out there where you turn on the TV and there are fabulous documentaries and a lot of reality shows that are just that. Maybe not exactly the dynamic I would choose to go out and prove that Bigfoot was real. But that's not saying that they don't find great stuff. It's not saying it's not real. It's just saying that I don't think that it would work for me in my area. But I know that there are projects going on all over, and they're big, and there's expeditions going on all over that are everywhere from very small to big, and everybody's going out there and putting in a lot of legwork and a lot of groundwork, and for that I know I'm certainly appreciative, and I would like to say that I see hope at the end of the tunnel. I think one day possibly, but I have to say, I don't know. I can't speak for the other groups. I can only speak for myself. There's just too many factors to say for sure, but I'd like to think that one day it'll be proven.
Well, I like the idea that we've got a lot of as technology.
Sounds like Gunner's breaking up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Jump in there, Julie.
Okay. Yeah, and I think another thing that I realize is there could very well be different types of evidence, if you will, that people have that they're just not sharing. You know what I'm saying? They're not telling general public, hey, we have this, we have that. They're holding stuff very close to their chest, and there's good reasons for that, perhaps
absolutely,
they have
Julie.
something they have that has been DNA tested, and they've gotten results back. But the problem being is, until you have an actual scientifically verified specimen that you draw that DNA from, and you say this is the DNA of the creature we call Bigfoot, then it's not really going to help prove anything because you don't have the verified species to sample it to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, short of capturing one, killing one, or finding, a body, all these DNA samples that are unknown, that don't have a classification, without something to compare them to, and see that there's too many chromosomes for this or whatever the case may be. Without that, what are we going to have? And that's my fear, and that's what keeps me from saying not yet, and it's not going to happen yet, because without one of those three things, there's nothing to compare it to. There's no
right.
Everything is just, it's all up in the air. We can all have our thoughts and our beliefs, and we can all have our experiences, but I'm not okay myself with capturing one. I mean, how are you going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was an easy
and
thing
it's
to do.
not okay to
been
remove
done.
something like that. Exactly. So, it's just not realistic yet. In my heart, I want to say, yes, we're just around the corner. But honestly, no, we're not. And I wouldn't be okay. I wouldn't be okay with capturing one or knowing that one was in captivity. What would that mean for that animal? Because regardless, that animal is a living, breathing, it's creature. It's on this earth for a reason. I certainly wouldn't want one of my family members to be randomly tested or, be put in a facility that would be horrific, terrifying, and a horrible existence. I don't even like to see, game farms. But then again, you think, okay, the animal was raised there, they don't know any different. But to me, I guess I'm more of a free spirit. I guess I think of it more as I would rather they remain, unknown and undocumented and unproven than the ulterior. And I don't know.
And I guess it's funny because there's all these researchers out there spending time. The funny thing is that all could be a mute point tomorrow if a truck driver driving down the road hits one, and a news crew shows up and they're actually we recovered a body, a type specimen that way. What's fascinating to me too is
Absolutely.
that because I mean there is DNA samples of something that comes back that ends up being in the human kind of family that you would think that would be enough for mainstream science to get involved and say, wow, there's something that we'd like to know what this DNA sample belongs to, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
Right. And it's mind-boggling as to why that is.
I mean, we're as close right now as we can be, in my mind, without the death or the killing or anything like that. We're as close as we can be right now, simply because there is that DNA that is strange. There's no proven thing right now, in the textbooks that we could, okay, it could be this or it could be that. I mean, there's not. And to me, that's huge. Unfortunately, it's right now, it's kind of like a big old circle that we're all going in. I get asked fairly regular, why? And like I said, it's personal. It's just something that I choose to do because I love it. I find it fascinating. But I don't believe by any stretch of the imagination, I'm going to be the one to present the science behind, and that's what we're going to need. Is we're going to need scientific proof, and I don't see that in my future, just simply because the way to do that is outside of my beliefs.
Mm-hmm. So the other possibility is to collect a skeletal specimen.
Right. If you watch a lot of these documentaries, like I said, some of them are not good. Some of them are, people that put a lot of time and effort and money and thought into going out there and making these things, these things be front and center. It still doesn't seem to be enough. To me, there's Dr. Bendernagel, Dr. Meldrum, people behind that have this huge scientific background. It's still not been enough, and they've taken proof, and they've taken the DNA, and I mean, is it going to take like a whole skeletal body? I think so, and even then, you're going to have people that say it was planted or it was doctored or this or that, and that's my fear is when it comes to that, when, like you said, if one is hit tomorrow on a highway, is that going to be enough? Are there still going to be people that dispute it and say, it was a spoof? Or we had a gentleman here in Montana a few years ago that chose to dress up in a military ghillie suit and do a Bigfoot hoax not far from my home, about 45 miles, and ended up getting hit by a car and being killed.
Mm-hmm.
So
I remember that.
Yeah, there are just so many people out there that cover the spectrum, that are like, oh, yes, they're going to believe, or no, we're going to need scientific proof, or you guys are. And these are the ones that just kind of crush your spirits a little bit, but you just keep moving on, is the ones that are like, you're crazy. It does not exist. But yet, why couldn't it? There's so many, there's so much history behind that has been proven. We know that the dire wolves existed. We know that Gigantopithecus existed. We know that the Megalodon shark existed. So why couldn't these things exist? Just because we weren't around to see, the woolly mammoth doesn't mean that it didn't exist. Montana's got the dinosaur museum over in Bozeman, and there are still people that are just dinosaurs. There you have your skeletal proof right there. But I just think that people are going to always be on the fence a little bit, and Bigfoot has just always been one of those things that throughout history you've had a really split population of who believes and who doesn't.
I think, I've had people, of course, ask me, why hasn't the body been found, blah, blah, blah. They want to dismiss it out of hand. They really have not. Most people that dismiss it out of hand have not taken any time to look at the mountains of evidence. And I always say my counter is if one anecdotal story is a fabrication or a misidentification, if one footprint isn't faked or
I think Gunner's breaking up there.
Then they exist.
We lost him again.
Yeah, Gunner, I think you're breaking up some there. But yeah, it's gonna take, even if somebody finds, say, like a hand or an arm or whatever, and they bring that forward, they're going to go, well, here's the DNA of whatever creature this arm belongs to. They're not going to, it could just go on and on. I honestly think that it's going to take a actual body of one of these things before science gives it any kind of credibility.
I have to agree with you. I do. And, here's what I say to the people. And, sometimes it's hard to have a thick skin and let things roll off your back. And, having started this and kind of been like, from the very beginning, hey, this is what I saw, having people look at you and be like, hey, you're crazy, you need medication, to having people outright laugh at me,
right.
To other people being completely rude and stuff. And here's what I say to them. This is my experience. These are my encounters. This is my research. You don't have to believe. But what I want you to do is I want you to go spend 23 years walking around the woods. I want you to spend 23 years camping and ATVing and fishing and picking up scat and spending that time out there, seeing patterns, seeing the changing seasons. I want you to go out there and I want you to do that, and I want you to make that your truth, because that's all I'm doing. I don't ask anybody to believe me. This is what I tell them. I'm just saying, this is my life. This is my truth. And until they see it, they're not going to believe it. There are just those people that are like, if I don't see it, I don't believe it. And then you have these people that are like, oh, I absolutely believe, even though they've never had anything to trip their imagination or trip their anything. They have nothing to base it on, but yet they believe, And that's what I say is, don't take what I'm telling you and just be like, oh, she's nuts, or, she seems authentic or whatever. I'm just saying, make it your own. Go out there and spend some time. Before you are negative and say, nope, not happening, what do you have to base your idea that they don't? I'm presenting you with this evidence that says, I believe they do. So until you can follow me into the woods, or until you can say, this is why I don't believe, and make that stand, then I'm not going to be rude to you, or I'm not going to be anything. But what is your evidence behind being such a negative person and being so mean about it, or calling me names, or calling the community that believes in Bigfoot and spends so much of their heart and soul and time and money in trying to prove this? Before you bash us, what is your proof? And that's how I try to say it is, you're asking me to provide a body or provide something like that. Well, I'm not okay with that. But ask me, tell me why you're asking that of me. Why couldn't it be real? Why couldn't it, exist in the deep, dark forest? I mean, since the dawn of time, there are things that have existed that have gone extinct, but every year, new things are found, new plant life, new life in the ocean, new species all over are discovered every single year. So,
right,
it'll happen.
And what gets me is there are species at the very bottom of the ocean that they only have photographs of, that they determine as an actual creature, and they give it a name, and it's a species, and it's just by a picture. So, but of course, there's probably not a lot of people who are trying to fake pictures of creatures at the bottom of the ocean and say, hey, this is, you know what I mean? It's like the whole hoaxing thing in this community, I think, has really caused one of the bigger problems as to why there is such a demand on an actual specimen.
I have to agree with you 100% on that, and that's always something that you have to take into consideration when you interview somebody is, do they have anything to gain for hoaxing? Is it a possibility? Is it realistic that they honestly traveled all this way? They, like I said, a picture is not going to do it. I don't mind looking at pictures and stuff like that. I believe a lot of the photos are, evidence within themselves, but it's just not going to do it. but you know, what do these people have to gain or whatever? And sometimes you have to make a judgment call and say, I don't believe it. And that is a huge problem. You know, misidentification is a huge problem as well. You get somebody that's, you know, comes to the mountains for a wilderness vacation, and they hear a sound in the woods, you know, that they're not used to, and automatically it's Bigfoot. You just simply can't do that. And it doesn't mean that I don't believe that they had something that was outside of, you know, my focus, but I just simply believe it was, you know, a misidentification. I don't think they mean to. I think that they believe that they heard Bigfoot. You know, I believe that they did, and it wasn't done, you know, to be harmful or malicious. It was simply just that, a misidentification. And you know, there are a lot of those.
Yes, there is. If I had $1 for every time I heard a recording of an owl that was supposed to be a Bigfoot, I think that's one of the biggest problems out there, you know. It's just a misidentification.
Well, there is, and I don't know how many photos of pictures I've taken myself and been like excited about, but yet you get them home and you download them onto the computer and you blow them up, or you adjust this, or you adjust this different resolution, and all of a sudden, you know, the tiny holes in front of the 5 toes start to stand out, and you're like, oh my goodness, you know, I was just excited about this 5-toed thing, and then adjusting the resolution or whatever, it's bare, nothing there. I mean, I've done that. I've done that myself. And I mean, to say that researchers all over haven't done it and don't own that mistake is not, you know, everybody is going to get excited or misidentify something.
Absolutely.
But
well, I'm wondering
as a whole. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just wondering if we had Gunner back yet.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
I can as well.
Not happy with my internet provider and cell phone service provider today, but Misty, we're just about out of time here. I really want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your input. We'll look for your next book in your trilogy, which I believe is going to be called, what is the next one? Rampage and Revenge? Is that correct?
Awesome.
That is correct, yes. And I would like to thank both of you. It's been a ton of fun. I've been super excited to do this for a while now, and it's been a great honor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great interview. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks again for joining us.
It was my pleasure.
Okay, we will talk to you again.
We'll talk soon.
Okay, take care.
So thank you again, Monster Xers, for listening in this Sunday and spending part of your Sunday with us. I want to thank my co-host, Julie Wrench, for filling in for Shane this weekend. And next week we have we will speaking with the writer and the excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. We will be having Debbie King McMartin and Mike Woolley come on to talk about the movie Skookum, which actually is a movie that's been in production for a while, and details Mike's encounter as a hunter back in some time ago. But Julie, was there anything else you wanted to share before we sign off?
No, that was a really good interview, and I look forward to hearing her at the international conference.
That's right. So if you haven't gotten your tickets,
I think we lost.
We've got Dr. Meldrum, John Bindernagel, Lauren Coleman. They've got quite a lineup. So get your tickets before they're all gone. Thank you again for everybody for joining us tonight, and we will catch you next week on Monster X Radio. Good night.
Have a great week.
You too.
The snooze button, our old friend. You've showed us patience, postponing the monotony of morning traffic, putting off the bland and boring breakfast for just 5 more minutes. Thank you for all you've done, but your services are no longer required. There is finally a breakfast worth waking up for. The triple cheese and hash brown breakfast burrito with provolone cheddar pepper jack and a crispy hash brown. Taste it before it's gone at Jack in the Box. Limited time only at participating restaurants.